common in the Americas, the ancient Indians,
Mm.
and then sometimes actually in Asia. But the only way this can happen is if there's a genetic sort of predisposition to large cranial mass.
Right. And do we know how old these are? These skulls? Have they done any testing on them? Do you know?
Poznanski found these skeletons in the Pleistocene alluvials that were covering Tiahuanaco. So they were fossilized, and they were at least as old as the detritus had been pulled over the area by water, which he called marine alluvials,
Mm-hmm.
signifying that he thought that they had been brought over by the ocean, which is an incredible statement, knowing that the Andean range is, at that area, 13,000 feet high.
Yeah. I mean,
So he thought they were at least predating, they were at least 13,000 years old, but probably in the order of around 30,000.
wow, really? I mean, I've actually heard stories about, or theories, I guess I should say, that Lake Titicaca actually was at some point at a much lower altitude from sea level, and that the entire Altiplano actually is an area that has been raised up because of earth changes that has been going on, basically on the entire globe. I mean, there's two ways to look at this. One is, of course, that the object that you mentioned before, this moon that was passing by or even colliding and crashing into Earth, was creating an incredible tidal wave, basically, that brought a lot of seawater and consequently, covered up this entire area. What do you think? Do you have a specific theory about this? What actually happened here?
Yeah, Immanuel Bukowski covers the Andean range really extensively in his book Worlds in Collision, and he talks about Tiahuanaco specifically. He says the same thing that Poznanski was, that he thinks that there were several series of cataclysms that were worldwide, and that they did include celestial bodies, very massive ones, moving close to the Earth. The effects of a small moon that's actually recorded in the great sun calendar that's there at the great temple in Tiahuanaco actually says the same thing. But what Velikovsky was saying was that when these moons actually move so close into the atmosphere of the Earth, not only did they fragment, they also, like you were saying, pull huge tidal bulges around the near the equator.
Yeah.
As soon as they fragmented, then these large floods that would have moved across the surface of the land retreated towards the poles, carrying all the Pleistocene flora and fauna with it.
Yeah.
And indeed, when you actually look at what's deposited in Alaska and in Siberia and other places in northern Canada, you find what's sometimes termed muck, a mixture of coniferous trees, deciduous trees, flora and fauna from the temperate and tropical zones, as well as the Arctic, all combined into one mass. Hippo, crocodile, dire wolf, saber-toothed tiger, mastodon, all these animals crunched into one layer. And even Charles Darwin was able to find evidence of this in the glaciers of the Andes when he was visiting Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that Velikovsky was noticing was that there seemed to be several series of these cataclysms, and that the Andes had indeed actually been raised for several thousand feet every time these cataclysms came to the Earth. And also that he thought that Tiahuanaco and Lake Titicaca were at sea level at one time.
Right.
And that it was actually an inlet to an actual bustling port city at one time.
That is fascinating. And one thing I'd like to ask you a little bit about is if you think that there is basically a message in the carvings, if you will, these etchings that are in the landscape, because in your article that you wrote for officialdisclosure.org or Survival Mall, that there is a little bit of hint that this is pointing towards an an alien or artificial or almost some otherworldly type of communication that is going on here. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, the shapes that you see are, according to what some of the Pizarro's chroniclers had recorded, the shapes that you see are actually supposed to cause a consciousness change in men, in the actual observer. You can see that if you look closely at some of the art history that's on the Tiahuanaco statues, they are almost exactly the same. And the literature around this art is that it is supposed to change the consciousness of men and actually to raise it. And there is a legend that Viracocha, the god, the creator god of the Inca and the pre-Inca, had actually had a temple in the center of Lake Titicaca. It was like submerged. And that there was a disc made out of gold that the Inca priests valued higher than anything they actually owned, because it was actually designed to align with the center of the galaxy at a certain point during a cyclical point of the precession of the equinox of the Earth. Mm-hmm. And this just opens up a couple concepts that are somewhat difficult for some people to understand, because you have to know what the precession of the equinox is and what its duration is. And it cycles roughly 26,000 years. And basically, all this is our orientation in space as we go around the sun. We're slightly at an angle, so that we have our seasons as we hurtle around the sun.
Right.
But that angle, of course, we spin like a top very, very slowly. So where our pole, our celestial pole is, say for north, is actually changing continuously, tracing this large circle in the northern hemisphere, celestial hemisphere. But the Inca understood exactly how long this took. It's actually 25,920 years.
Right, the great year, and I know that many of our listeners are familiar with the precession of the equinox, and if they aren't, they definitely can read up on it. But we should assume at this point, David, that everyone listening are familiar with the precession of the equinox.
Yes, the Inca understood that the precession had a cyclical nature, and that there were actually quaternary points in it where they looked forward to. They would look forward to it, but they would anticipate cataclysm on the Earth.
Yeah.
And it was at these points too that they didn't really recognize them as just danger points, because what would happen was also a rebirth, a resurgence of civilization after a cataclysm. They actually looked at it as a cleansing, in a way. So this disc was actually designed to align with the center of the galaxy and pull in this light. So they actually called it, metaphorically, I suppose, light, but it was supposed to represent some sort of high knowledge that came from on high that was actually purveyed by Viracocha himself. And Viracocha actually fits a lot of the cosmological creation myths that are found in the Middle East.
Really?
The Sumerian ones, the Babylonian, the Egyptian, the idea that the earliest god was somehow born from the celestial sea. And he's characterized by coming from the foam of the sea. Viracocha actually means the foam of the sea. And what the foam of the sea then was actually is the Milky Way itself, the galaxy, as it would actually be during these solstices and equinoxes. At this point that they say this golden disk would be aligned and actually with the center of the galaxy and pull in this information. But what actually happened was that the galaxy, the Milky Way, would align itself on the horizon of the Earth right before sunrise, and that the sun would itself rise in the center of the galaxy. And knowing that actually occurs, and then looking at the history of the Spanish chroniclers of the area of the Inca, you find that they had an extraordinary knowledge that we're only coming up to speed with now. With this idea that the center of the galaxy somehow aligns at these quarter points of the precession of the equinox, that we are approaching one right now. you combine that with the information that's in the Mayan calendar, which points to 2012 actually as being that point where we are aligned to the center of the galaxy.
Right.
And that there's an end point and then again a beginning or a rebirth. These fit together, even though they're separated by thousands of miles and many thousands of years.
Mm.
There's a pre-Inca. I mean, there was chronicles of pre-Inca existing far beyond written history. And the farther back you go, the more sophisticated